Hey everybody, this is Phoebe with Love Relationships Real Talk. On today's episode, we will be talking about how to master the role of the politician. This is the last episode in this series about mastering the role in your love relationships. But if you have other ideas about roles that people play in their love relationships that you would like me to look into and investigate, I would be glad to do so. So please email me, and the email address is right there in the description, or please leave comments and I will be glad to look into that and share other roles that we might experience in our love relationships. Wasn't this a fruitful conversation? I really got so much out of having the conversation in and of itself, but also from the viewers who wrote letters and made comments about the things that we've been talking about in this series about the roles we play. It's so important that we have an understanding of who we're dealing with, who we are being in our relationships. Once we understand the intricacies of the roles we take on in our relationships, then it makes it so much easier to manage and deal with things that will come up that look a certain way based on the role your partner is, or based on who you're being, and then how you can adjust so that it works better with the person that you're with. I've heard so many comments that people have been having these conversations with their partners, determining what roles they are, and then how to better interact with each other as a result. So this is the letter that inspired the role of the politician. The viewer writes, I fell in love with my girlfriend within the first week of our relationship. She engaged me on such a high intellectual level that I literally fell in love with her based on our conversations alone. So I can understand this. I have suggested over the years with many people that I've coached that they should begin relationships that they find online with solely writing the person that they're interested in for at least 3 or 4 weeks before they even engage in a conversation on the telephone. Most people here's my number, first response to an email. Here's my number, call me, let's go out, let's hook up. That is not the way to go when you're really seriously looking for a love relationship, because it's not all about how a person looks or how a person interacts with you in person, or the sexual energy that you're interested in finding out whether or not you have with this person. What's going to make a relationship last and sustain is that relationship in which a person feels a strong intellectual, energetic connection with that person. And you can determine whether or not that's there within those first few emails. There's nothing more exciting than waiting for that next email inside of a conversation that has drawn you in and engaged you in a highly intellectual way. So I completely understand what this viewer is talking about. So you try that. It really makes for a beautiful process as the relationship begins and unfolds. So that was a side note, commercial break, for internet dating. Back to the letter. So we met online, we emailed one another for a couple of weeks before we actually met. I could not wait to receive the next email during that time. I was watching your episode about creating a relationship with vision and intention. And your comments put into words exactly what I've been feeling in this relationship with this woman that I've had for the last 2 years. I was so enamored by my love 2 years ago that I didn't address the things that I actually wanted in a relationship. I didn't set the intention or the tone of the relationship. And now I feel like I have no say or power in my relationship. My love thinks she knows what's best for everything. And when I suggest otherwise, she methodically discounts my every point. I feel like my needs don't matter. I get great benefits in this relationship. We live in an extravagant lifestyle. We are both successful, and she fits into my public and professional world perfectly. Others looking in on our life together would wonder, what am I complaining about? She's gorgeous, she's intelligent, she's charismatic. And I ask myself the same thing sometimes. But I feel there is an insidious energy at work in our relationship, and I'm constantly confronted with it. What can I do to address this and resolve it? So do you see what I mean about answering these letters with advice? It's so difficult because they're difficult situations, and I don't necessarily have the answers for them. I don't know all of the moving parts of this relationship, but what I can suggest is a conversation that you can open up with your partner to help you both dig deeper in your relationship to find those areas that you need to really resolve that aren't working for one or both people inside of the relationship. Most times when you open up and have these conversations, you find that your partner has been feeling similar things inside of the relationship as well, because you're reacting and responding in ways that are not working for the relationship either, to the things that you don't like that are happening in the relationship. So with the politician, as we stated earlier, I just want to review what it is to live with a politician. They are thoughtful and intellectual in their communication. They're charismatic and capable in meeting others at heightened and emotional psychological levels. So this is what draws us to the politician person in our love relationship. And isn't it interesting, and isn't it true, that the very things that drew us to a person, at times they become the very things that make us so frustrated and annoyed and agitated, and brings anxiety in us also later on down the line. Those very things that drew us to them do that also. So this often happens inside of the relationship with the politician, because they're highly intellectual and they're operating at that level a lot of the times, but from an intellectual perspective, but not an emotional perspective. So that's what's missing inside of this relationship, because from an emotional perspective, this person is feeling like, yes, you meet my requirements and I can check off this box and check off that box in regards to what you bring to the relationship. But there's something that's missing, that's void in the under layers of all of it, that make them feel like things aren't being addressed for them in an emotional and psychological and spiritual way. And I think that's great that they've come to a point where they can acknowledge that, and that they want to bring that to the attention of their love, so that they can bring healing and growth and balance into the love relationship. And that's really all most people want to do, is they want the relationship to feel good. They want to feel like they have equal purpose and input in their love relationships. And all we have to do is find a way, given the role that we're living with and that we have ourselves, how we can intermingle the good in both of those roles and benefit from that, and not play into the cons or the things that break down the relationship based on the roles that we're playing. Although, as the viewer mentioned, whenever they want to bring something to their partner's attention, it's mentally draining to have these conversations with their politician partner. Because the politician is so highly intellectual and very much in their heads, it's really difficult for them to stand down and really consider and listen to what their partner is saying. Because a lot of times it's an emotional thing that they're pointing to that's missing inside of the relationship, because pretty much everything else is covered in terms of, societal status, in terms of your public persona, in terms of your economic, or, whatever the case is, you created a life that looks pretty good if you're dealing with someone who's living with a politician. But then when you go home and in your quiet moments, you feel like there's something amiss. And so this is what I feel the viewer is speaking to. And then they have to bring it to their partner. And in most cases, people have given up in having these types of conversations with their politician partner, because it's just too draining to go through the intellectual obstacle course to get to the other side of where you want to be with your partner. And so what the politician has to realize is that if they want to maintain this relationship, they have to get out of their heads. And the first step to doing that is to take time, breathe, and listen to what's being said to them, and then process it. That's what we have to do to give the politician time, because they are very cerebral. They do need to process things in a mental way. And so we have to give them time to process that information and then come back and look at ways that you can move forward. So the first thing that I'm suggesting is that you bring the issue clearly stated to your politician partner, and maybe you might need to set parameters or norms or ground rules for having these types of conversations, where the politician has to take a stance of listening and considering what's being said to them, instead of processing and analyzing and breaking everything down to the most minute details in order to be right. So this is a situation where a lot of times you'll be in a relationship with someone who's a right fighter, because they do have insights and multiple ways of looking at things, and they just throw all of that stuff at you. And that's what's so sometimes demoralizing and so intense in these conversations, because you have to not just deal with the emotions that you're feeling, but then try to process the intellectuality that's being thrown at you at the same time. So in order to have these real talk conversations, setting boundaries or guidelines or ground rules for having the conversation might be necessary, because a lot of times when we're in these relationships with the politician, if the politician is someone who really turns you on and you're in a relationship with them, having conversations is usually very invigorating and very insightful and exciting, because they have so much information and they have so many different perspectives at looking at things, and being insightful and digging deeper into various situations is very interesting, having conversations with them. But when you're talking about things from an emotional level, it kind of sidesteps or sidetracks the real issue, which is, how do I address how my partner is feeling? And a lot of times that doesn't come from the mind, it comes from the heart. And so that's the first thing that I would suggest that you do inside of this love relationship where there's a politician. Some ground rules that you can put in place is one person speaks at a time. Another is you listen without interruption. The third ground rule that I would suggest is that if the conversation is getting too intense and heady, not intense and emotional, because you need to stir up the emotion that's going on or that's not being expressed inside of the relationship. You need to do that. But if it's getting too heady, and you know how that conversation kind of breaks down, like you have to process things, you're being asked 100,000 questions, being fired at you so that they can prove their point, that type of conversation, if that's starting to happen, then in the ground rules, you can say that when that time starts to approach or starts to show up in the conversation that you're having, that you're able to put a pause on the conversation and then come back to it at another time. And that person, and then you I guess you have to have a conversation about what that looks like for you inside of those types of conversations that maybe your partner isn't aware of that they do. They start to dissect and break things down in such a way where they are setting up, basically building a case to be right. And so when that happens, you put a pause and then you come back and have the conversation later. And that's agreed upon when you will come back and continue the conversation. So those are just some ideas for ground rules that you can possibly put into place to have this conversation with your politician love. Secondly, it's very important that you're able to clearly ask for what you need inside of the relationship, because the politician needs to have good reason for doing what they're going to be doing, because they do things in processes. And so if what you need is for your partner to be more emotionally connected to you, you need to be able to express specifically how that looks for you in the relationship. So one of the tools that I've used in my coaching and also for myself in my own relationship to express what I need in a clear and concise way, in a specific way, which is what the politician really needs, is to read the book, The 5 Languages of Love by Gary Chapman. So in his book, he maps out 5 ways in which people receive love. And these are the ways that he mentioned. One is receiving gifts. Another is receiving quality time with your love. Words of affirmation is a language of love, and acts of service, and physical touch. These are all different ways that people perceive themselves being loved. Now, a lot of times people will give love in the way that they want to receive love, but that doesn't always match what your partner's way of receiving love is. That's why we have to have the real conversations and to try to figure that out. What does my partner need in order to perceive that they're being loved by me? And it has to be in a way that they can receive it, not the way we choose to give it. So the third thing that I would suggest that the person who's in this relationship with a politician partner do is to seek balance but not change. Because a lot of who the politician is relies on their intellectual capacity and their charisma and those things that actually makes their lives fruitful and exciting to live through the engagements that they develop and that they create. I'm suggesting that you try and have a conversation that doesn't look like your politician completely changing who they are. That's not fair either, because who they are is a big piece of how they present themselves in the world. And now you're asking for them to change that. So have the intention of seeking balance, but not change. You want to see some changes in the way they do things, but you don't want them to change who they are. So set that as your intention in the conversation that you're having with your love. I hope this helped in you finding balance and love in your love relationship with your politician partner. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave those in the comments section below, and like my videos or dislike my videos, and then let me know why you didn't like it. And or even better, subscribe to my channel and stay in the conversation. I'm enjoying this so much with you. So I'll see you next time on Love Relationships Real Talk.